Welcome, everyone, to a discussion about community well-being. This is our theme for the month of August. And if we were to define what community well-being is, we might say it's where you live and what you give, as in what you give back to your community. So my special guest today is Betsy Warriner, who happens to be my mom. Welcome, Mom.
Thank you.
So, Mom, I want to start with just giving everybody a little bit of a flavor about your story. So you came to Bend, Oregon, it was about 15 years ago?
18 years ago.
18 years ago.
Yes.
And this is a place that you've really created a home for yourself, a community for yourself here in terms of where you live. But you've also been really active in giving back to this community.
Well, I felt as soon as I moved here is that it was a home. Just felt welcome. And there is such a strong community here. So I was able to find ways to give very easily.
And you know, a lot of community well-being in terms of kind of the place where we live is that it reflects our deepest values. So would you say that that's the case for you here in Bend?
Yes.
So what are some of those values that you feel like are reflected?
Well, the value of giving, caring, kindness, and a value of collaboration. This is a very collaborative community. There's many groups of people who are working together to improve lives for everyone.
So again, we're talking about Bend, Oregon, which is in the middle of the state. So I want to talk a little bit more about the work that you've done here in Bend, Oregon, in giving back. So it's a place where you feel like you've kind of come home. And Alicia, my sister, and I like to joke about how we call you the Queen of Bend. And you've really been embraced by this community, but for the work that you've done and the life of service that you've brought to Bend, Oregon. So can you share with us a little bit about some of the ways that you've given back to Bend, Oregon?
Sure. One of the ways that what I started doing as soon as I got here was creating the Regional Volunteer Center. So I worked with some other people and we created Volunteer Connect. And it is now called Volunteer Central Oregon. And we have about 200 community organizations who invite people to volunteer with them.
So basically, it's kind of a way of connecting volunteers with volunteer opportunities.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And it's about 200 organizations that you're working with?
Yes.
And any estimate as to how many people volunteers have been served by these two organizations?
Well, I would say at least 1,000.
Over the 18 years.
But probably more than that.
Uh-huh. And not to mention the fact that thousands of lives have been touched by those volunteers.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's all kinds of organizations, everything from environmental to children to people who are in need, animals, everything you can imagine.
And so you've gotten, in addition to the fact that we can't go downtown without a million people stopping you and saying, hello, Betsy, but you've also gotten a lot of recognition for this work that you've done.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, I just feel as if people have honored the work of Volunteer Central Oregon and other things that I've done.
Yeah, so you've been in the newspaper quite a bit, on the local news, and you've been awarded some, given some community awards for the work that you've done.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, so we might say, as I mentioned at the beginning, community well-being, we might define that as where you live and what you give. And particularly this part on giving back is something that has really helped you, in my view, to really thrive. And in fact, I actually featured Mom in my book, Workplace Wellness That Works, as an example of the embodiment of community well-being. So we're going to spend a little bit of time here now kind of digging into community well-being and kind of what are those essential components to there being community well-being across the community, but also for the individuals within it. So I know that one of the things that you talked about, Mom, was the need to address income inequality. That
Yes.
in order for there to be community well-being, that we need to do something about addressing that. So can we hear a little bit about your thoughts on that?
I think it's fine that people who work hard um, earn a good living from doing that. But it's really important for a community to have more equality among each other. And when you have extremely divergent incomes, you have a community that's tippy, that's uncertain, that's angry, that's scared.
And certainly something that we're seeing a lot of with a society that is perhaps more divided than it's been in a long time, a lot of divisions.
Yes.
And likely coming from a lot of that income inequality. I know there's studies that came out recently from the Brookings Institute in showing that the level of income inequality in the U.S. today is as at the highest level that it's been since the late teens, since about 1919. So there's been a profound growth in that level of income
Right.
inequality.
I think we need to understand that what we need is to lift all boats.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're trying to keep some people down and lift other people, it's going to bring us all down.
Yeah. So,
Except for a few that are at the top, and then you have like this.
yeah.
But if we can work together for all groups of people to come up, then we have community well-being.
All right. So income inequality is something that we need to address so that we can improve community well-being for everyone. I know that a second piece of this, and I think that this really ties to this idea of just, how do we start to kind of address the fact that our society is so divisive today? And you talk about the importance of us listening, really listening to one another. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, if I were really listening to you, I would ask you what you believe, how you're feeling, what your life is like, and then I would just listen to what you say. And I think where people do that, where we're really hearing each other, and it's mutual, then you would be listening to me, that you have a stronger community. And especially if we're listening to each other across differences of opinion, differences of life experience, differences of background.
And even differences in political views.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So you started an organization called Community Conversations.
Exactly.
Which is kind of dedicated to this. So
Yes.
can you tell us a little bit about that?
So with Community Conversations, we come together and we talk with each other about various community issues. And we have as a basis for our conversations, listening for understanding.
Listening for understanding.
Right. So listening for understanding rather than listening to figure out how I'm going to argue back.
Okay. I think we're all pretty good at that, right?
Yes.
All right. And then the third piece is to boost community well-being for all is nature.
Yes.
And I know that's something that you really love. It's been a big part of your life.
Definitely.
Is nature.
Yes.
So, in thinking about community well-being, having access to green spaces and to nature really benefits everyone. But give us some thoughts on how nature connects to community well-being in your view.
Well, first of all, right behind you, there are some young pine trees that, as I look at you, I see the trees behind you, and it makes me feel more at peace. But a community that has lots of parks that are close to people's homes, that no park is more than, say, a half a mile from my home. I mean, no home is more than half a mile from a park. Mm-hmm. But also, Bend is surrounded with wilderness.
Yeah.
And we have a system in place in Oregon where that is true, that instead of having sprawl out into the wilderness, we protect that. And So I can easily go out and be walking in wild places along the river, up in the mountains, and so can others in the community. We share that together.
So it's having access to nature outside of the kind of center of town, but also having parks
Yes,
inside.
it's just extremely important.
You know, when I lived in New York City, which was back in the late 90s, the city was at risk losing a good portion of the parks. They just didn't have the money to support the parks. And at the 11th hour, Bette Midler actually intervened and donated an enormous sum of money to save the parks in New York City.
That's wonderful.
So a great example of how we can bring nature into the center of urban centers as well.
Right. And then it's extremely important that we make sure that nature is open to all groups in our community.
So bringing it in so it's available to everyone, but also helping everyone to access it outside of the community. All right. Okay, Mom. So we just had an opportunity to talk about community well-being, kind of macro level, and kind of what we collectively can be thinking about doing to improve community well-being for all. So again, that includes addressing income inequality. It's about building forums for people to really listen to each other, particularly people with different viewpoints, and then finally to bring nature in and to increase access to nature outside of these urban centers. So I want to talk a little bit more about kind of what you have done, because again, as I mentioned at the beginning, I used you as an example in my book, Workplace Wellness That Works, as the embodiment of the power of giving back, of community well-being. And something that I often say is that you make 82 look great. So you're 82 years old and you are living and thriving.
82 is great.
And 82 is great. So let's talk a little bit more about what you personally do to enhance your well-being. And I know that community is a big part of that.
Yes.
So walk us through that.
So community is definitely a big part, but having fun, living life, is an enormous part of it. So I am involved with so many different projects that I started feeling, even though I'm retired, I started feeling overwhelmed. So I created a life compass. And this really helps me figure out where I'm going. If you know north on your compass, then you know where all the other directions are.
Okay, so tell us about your North Star. So you write that as your North Star. So when you're north, what is that?
North for me is my family and my close friends. That gives me my direction. And then, of course, I have fun as part of the compass. So I sometimes call that renewal. And that's on the west side.
So this side, west side. There we go.
And then the ground on the south is things like meditation, nature, what brings peace into my life. Music is a big part of that. But on the
East side,
over here, it helps when you're looking at this straight on. On the east side is my purpose of community building. And there are many projects involved with that. But I think this compass is helping me to balance between all those things. So then I created a set of cards.
Okay.
And
so this is kind of more, so this is kind of, if I can just repeat back. So this is kind of your direction, your kind of internal compass that kind of keeps you feeling, like you're connecting to your sense of purpose every day, that you're renewing and being aware of what those practices are that help you to renew, to have fun. So like hanging out with us, hopefully is a sense of renewal.
Oh, yes.
Grounding yourself with music and with nature and even meditation, and then always, kind of staying connected with your family as your North Star.
Right.
So now this is kind of more what guides you on a day-to-day basis. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
So I put the compass into cards, and so I have little cards like this is family, the North, and one of my many things for renewal is playing the piano.
So we're over here.
So
Okay.
I have my little piano card, and then in the ground, literally, I have garden
Oh yeah, Mom's garden is amazing.
and home. And I know for a lot of people, gardening can be a real chore, but for me, it's just grounding.
Well, Mom, in the Blue Zones research, one of the things that a lot of centenarians do who are living and thriving in places like Okinawa and in Icaria, Greece, and Sardinia in Italy, is they do a lot of gardening.
Yes.
So it's not only are you connecting with nature, but you're also moving naturally. So it's not really exercise, but it's really moving naturally, or what I like to call motion infusion. So it's kind of an infusion of motion into your life.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So then these are cards for the community building projects, which are on the purpose side of my compass. So I have community conversations, and I go through these cards occasionally. I'm thinking, okay, what do I need to do next? So I'll look at them. Community conversations. Is there something I need to do for that today? Oh, yes. I need to set up another meeting of the leadership team.
So you've got a leadership team for community conversations,
Right.
and the events happen once a quarter. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay,
Yeah.
so you're sending out invites and follow-up and having
Exactly.
to set up the venue. I know you all have moved to a virtual format during COVID, but prior to that, you were in person.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And then Volunteer Central Oregon. Is there something I need to do for that?
And Volunteer Central Oregon is part of an organization called Better Together, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's the Regional Volunteer Center. And then I also am a precinct committee person with the Deschutes Democratic Party.
So you're going around,
So
talk
that's-
about connecting with your neighbors in your neighborhood. You're that gal who's going around knocking on doors and asking people if they're voting.
Yeah.
And encouraging them to vote for specific
Get out
people.
the vote.
That's great.
And then as part of my church, this card it says LOVE, L-O-V. It's our Latinx Opportunity Visioning Committee. And there's a lot of things we're doing to connect our church with the fairly large Latinx community in Bend. And then, and on a more personal level, is my donations card. So actually, that requires a lot of thought as to what I'm going to donate money to. And then I am part of a couple of discussion groups around anti-racism. And I occasionally lead one of those groups, and we read a book. And the book that I most recently led was the book discussion of caste. And now another person is leading the group, and we're reading The Sum of Us. So it helps to have these little cards instead of feeling like, what do I do now? Okay, let's see, what's the top card? Discussion groups. Is there anything I need to do for that? Actually, not now. But donations, yes. So I'll sit down and do that.
So it's kind of the old school, like when you're giving a speech and you have your note cards that you
Yes,
use.
yes.
But this is for your day-to-day life.
Right.
And, one of the things that really strikes me, Mom, is that you're retired, and yet you're one of the busiest, most involved people I know. And not busy in a mindless way, but really connecting with your community.
Right. So sometimes you might say, "You want to go out for supper?" And I say, "So sorry, I'm going to be involved in a Zoom meeting tonight."
Like with the Democrat group or with
Yes.
your meditation group. So
Right.
all of these different kind of micro communities that help you to feel that you're part of, that help you to feel part of
Right.
a larger community.
But since you are part of my North Star, we do go out for dinner a lot.
Well, Mom, thank you so much for being a model for all of us to follow and for sharing with us some ideas around, first of all, your story, and then secondly, some things that we can collectively be thinking about doing so that we can improve community well-being for everyone. And then finally, some things that we can perhaps glean from you, some tricks on things that we can do as individuals to help boost our overall well-being, but that overall well-being really tied to community well-being.
I think that connecting to community builds happiness for me and for the whole community.
You know, there's so much, you know, when we think about giving back, a lot of times we're thinking about what it does for the community. But what the research shows, and I think as you really embody, is that while it's good for the community, arguably it's even better for the giver.
Yes, I agree.
Well, Mom, thanks so much.
Thank you. This is wonderful.